歡迎各位觀眾收睇周一長談，我係你哋呢一集嘅主持人梁英年。喺過去呢幾個星期咧，我哋都好關心有關加拿大咧呢個毒品嘅問題、毒品政策、醫療撥款、聯邦政府同各省嘅關係。但喺華人社區咧有一個好熱烈嘅討論，就係點解我哋嘅政府要將毒品非刑事化，同埋呢個問題已經係纏繞咗加拿大咧過去嗰10幾20年㗎啦。我哋只係見到個問題嘅嚴重性咧係日益加增，因為過量吸食毒品死亡嘅人數咧，亦都係與日俱增嘅。過去用咗咁多嘅錢、咁多嘅社區嘅服務，政府發出咗咁多嘅信息，有唔同嘅政策，點解個問題冇舒緩到，反而咧係越嚟越嚴重咧？咁今日咧我就係請嚟卑詩省嘅官式反對黨嘅黨領，就係卑詩自由黨嘅黨領馮宜幹 Falcon 咧，同大家係去討論呢個問題㗎。咁佢而家咧喺線上邊咧用 Zoom 咧係同我哋一齊咧討論呢個問題嘅。So welcome to the program, Mr. Falcon.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, Ronald.
We know that the legislature sitting started a few weeks ago, and it sounds like not much come out from the discussion in the legislature. Could you just give us a very brief summary of what happened in the last week or two? Why we don't hear any concrete suggestion or anything going to come out from the legislature? What can you do there?
It's very concerning because, you know, the NDP are responsible for managing the business of the House, we call it. And there's been so much mismanagement and disorganization that there's no work for us to do. And so literally we have a situation where the only bills we have before the House are very minor, tiny little one-sentence bills with, you know, that are making small amendments to the Real Estate Foundation Act. And none of us, we all support it, so no one's arguing about it. And yet the NDP are putting up their own MLAs to pretend to ask questions, so that we call it filibustering. So they're trying to delay and fill up time because there's nothing else to do in the legislature. And this has been going on now for the past several weeks. And we're very concerned because it's very expensive bringing the legislature into session, and to have us all sitting around with nothing to do because the NDP can't organize their work properly is very concerning. And the other problem with that is that when they start bringing in all the work, and we start debating the budget, and we go through budget estimates for each of the ministries, and then if they introduce more bills, then we're going to run into a time problem because they've also shortened the legislative period by another couple of weeks. And so that means that we're probably going to run into a challenge where we don't have enough time at the end to go through and ask all the right questions that should be asked. And the NDP will probably use closure, which means they force through some of these bills without proper debate, like they did with Bill 36, for example, which really has negatively impacted the medical professions that are very upset about it.
So this sounds interesting. Usually it's the opposition party that use filibuster to drag on the time when they cannot oppose legislation or bill from the government. But you're saying the government themselves use filibuster to waste the time. It sounds like there's not much they want to do. That is what is going on. And it's so expensive. So for 100 people sitting at the legislature, as you say, is the House, and waste all those time.
Yes.
Now, and you talk about the medical bill, and the last few weeks is talking about the federal government giving money to different provinces and have this one-on-one contract to improve the service of the Medical Health Service Act. What do you think about that arrangement? Are we getting our fair share, and it's going to help to improve the medical service in BC?
It's going to make very, very little difference. I can tell you British Columbia's share is about $600 million a year, which represents about 2% of our healthcare budget. So, well, 2% is better than nothing. It's not very much. And I can tell you that the problem we have with our healthcare system is there's a tremendous amount of mismanagement of this system by this government. This government has 64 vice presidents at the different health authorities earning an average of $400,000 a year. And yet we still are getting the worst outcomes in the country. We have the longest wait times for walk-in clinics in the entire country. We have 1 in 5 British Columbians cannot even access a family doctor. 1 million British Columbians are on a wait list to see a specialist. and our cancer care, which used to be, when I was in government, back before I retired and back in 2012, we had the best outcomes in North America. The cancer center in BC was considered North America's finest. Today, we're at the very bottom after 2 terms of NDP government. So I'm very, very concerned about how they're mismanaging the healthcare system and the fact that we're getting such terrible results.
Now, one of the focus of the medical service in BC is, as the Premier EB said, I was happily surprised to see the BC Liberals come out with their proposal to build a strong public healthcare system around mental health and addiction. I was very glad to see the BC Liberals come on side and to shift their position that way. But before he said that, I heard you said BC Liberal has a 1.5 billion recovery plan proposal. And then Premier EB came out and said that. So what's going on? You copy him or he copy you?
Well, we announced our plan just over 3 weeks ago, and we called our plan Better is Possible. And what I said is that we are going to shift very dramatically away from what the NDP government has been doing. What the NDP government is doing is they're focused on 2 things. One, they want to decriminalize hard drugs like heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine. And 2, they want to provide publicly paid for drugs to people that are struggling with addiction. They call that harm reduction. And I'm very concerned that their entire focus is on publicly supplied addictive drugs and decriminalization. And I said that what we have to do is move in a very different direction, and that what BC Liberals would do, our primary focus would be on getting people treatment so they can get off of their addiction. That should be the primary goal of government. And so I said that we were going to spend $1.5 billion over 3 years to help people get treatment they need. That's part 1. Part 2 is we will also deal, Ronald, with the people that have severe mental health problems. Sometimes they have severe mental health and addiction problems together. And there are a lot of the people that are causing problems in Chinatown, for example, people that are involved in violent offenses, attacking people, random strangers, etc. And what we would do is take those people off the streets and put them into special 24/7 care with proper psychiatric and medical supports. And we would take the facility at Riverview that we built called Redfish, it was built under the BC Liberals, and we would expand it from 105 beds to 300 beds. And then we would open up facilities similar to that on Vancouver Island, in the north, in the Thompson Okanagan, and in the Kootenays, so that people with severe mental health and addiction issues get taken off the streets and put into proper care. That's the proposal we announced. Now, the David Eby's Minister of Mental Health and Addictions described our proposal as a distraction. Okay? Now, but what happened was everybody across British Columbia liked it so much, and it was getting so much positive feedback, that now David Eby and the NDP are saying, quickly, spend another $1 billion on treatment and recovery and quickly put it in the budget 2 weeks before the budget's about to be released. I've never seen that happen in my life. I've been a finance minister. You don't change the budget 2 weeks before you're about to present it. And but he's doing it because he realizes that we are right and the public really supports our approach. But here's the problem. They will throw a lot of money and say that they care about treatment and recovery, but the truth is they are so focused on publicly supplied addictive drugs and decriminalization that I don't think that they're going to fix this problem.
Now, but they said the BC Liberal, Kevin Falcon, also support the decriminalization of hard drugs, and you support people carrying small amount of heroin, cocaine in their pocket. We shouldn't prosecute them and let them carry it.
No, so it's very important to understand this, and I want this to be totally clear. I've said this in the Caucasian media, I say it in the Chinese media, the same thing. I am very concerned about the NDP's approach to decriminalization. This is their government that went ahead to do this, okay? And we've always said, even the federal government said to the NDP, before you do this, make sure you have guardrails around it. In other words, make sure you've got proper education in place. Make sure that, these drugs and drugs aren't going to be used in places like around schoolyards and in parks, etc. And the NDP have done none of that. And so we've been very concerned that the way that they're proceeding is not going to end well. It really isn't. Because, for example, you've got communities on Vancouver Island, like Campbell River, that are saying, they're passing bylaws to say, well, we don't want any open use of drugs in our parks. I mean, imagine this, you're not allowed to drink a beer in a park, but apparently you can go there with your heroin or your cocaine and start using drugs in front of families and children. These are the kind of things that the government was supposed to have taken care of before they plunged ahead with decriminalization. They didn't do that, and now we're very, very concerned and very critical of the approach that the NDP government is taking.
I don't care about all those polls showing the majority of British Columbians support the decriminalization of hard drugs. But in the Chinese community, I can tell you for sure, the majority of people in the Chinese community, they are against the decriminalization of any drug. Because we know from history, drug kill, drug make us weak. In the historic China, the British sent in heroin to make Chinese weak. So we know it's not the way we should go. How can we solve this problem? We declare emergency, the drug crisis, for the last almost 10 years. And the situation is getting worse and worse. How can we help to reduce the number of people got addicted to this bad thing? And how can you follow the money trail? So many addicts, there are a lot of money changing hands. Where are those money? How can we stop it?
Yeah, this is such an excellent question, because you're correct. It was declared a public health emergency in 2016, and the NDP got elected in 2017. And in that time, in the entire time that they've now been in government, every single year we have seen the rate of overdose deaths get worse every single year. And yet, the government response to this, the NDP government response to this is twofold. Number one, they say, let's do more publicly supplied addictive drugs. They've even got vending machines in downtown Vancouver. Just like, you know, when you go buy a pop, you can go in and you can get your drugs. Then they said, you know, decriminalization. This is going to be a big solution. Now, I should tell you, I've spoken to the chief of police. The chief of police in Vancouver says, Kevin, we haven't been arresting people for 2.5 grams or less for many years, or not very many. It's a very small number. But the problem when you decriminalize it is, now you've taken something out of the police's hands. They can't even take it from somebody. So if they arrest somebody and they take them into the jail, when they release them, they have to give them back their heroin or their cocaine or whatever. And that makes a lot of the police very nervous, because what if that person then goes and uses those drugs and then dies because they're laced with fentanyl or have you? Is there a responsibility now for the police? So the concern is, I don't think the NDP have properly thought this through. And the federal government was quite clear. They said to the NDP, we will allow you to do this experiment for a couple of years, but you have to make sure you keep all the data and that you do these things to make sure that there are guardrails around this thing that you want to try. And they're very bad at keeping data, and they're very bad at putting guardrails around this. And the other thing I'll say, Ronald, that I'm very concerned about is in Portland, Oregon, where they tried decriminalization, after 1 year, the number of deaths went up 39%. And what I want this NDP government to say very clearly somewhere at some point is, if we start getting really bad results here, we're going to stop doing this if it's not working. But they will not say that. And what I have said is, okay, you've decided to go forward with this experiment. We want to make sure that all the data is out there for all the British Columbians to see. And if it's not making an improvement, then I want their commitment that they're going to fix it or change direction.
The experiment is for 3 years. And I think we will have an election within these 3 years. So you're telling our viewers, if you form the government, you became the premier of BC, and you see the number of people die from overdose within these 3 years, you are going to stop this experiment. Are you going to do that?
Well, I always follow the evidence. If there's one thing you need to know about Kevin Falcon, is I am very much driven by evidence. I make decisions based on what is working and what isn't working. And if something is not working, I will stop doing it. I will change direction. And the same goes for decriminalization. I am absolutely not wedded to this idea of decriminalization. We have said if that's where the NDP want to go and they want to try this proposal for 3 years, and they're the ones that pushed for it, then we said make sure there are guardrails around it. They haven't put those guardrails in place. I haven't seen any education for children. I'm very concerned about, all the language they use: harm reduction, decriminalization, safe supply. What message are we sending to our children with that language? There is no such thing as safe supply. All addictive drugs are dangerous. They can be fatal. And that's why physicians are telling me all the time they're very uncomfortable with this language, because they know that when someone's taking highly addictive drugs, they are dangerous. And so, I think education of our children is very important. And none of that is in place today. And I'm very concerned about that.
So there's some of the factors, some of the evidence that you are looking for. Number of people got addicted within these 3 years. Number of kids, children got addicted within these 3 years. And number of people die from overdose within these 3 years. If they are all negative, that means this experiment is not successful.
That's
and
right.
You're going to change direction.
Then we change direction.
The other question is, how can we slow the supply of these drugs?
Yeah.
And the money trail. How are you going to deal with it? How can we stop this drug from coming in? And how can we get the money coming up from this drug trade?
Sure. So a couple of things with that. First of all, there is a belief that, and initially a lot of the fentanyl was coming in, and being smuggled into the country. I'm sad to say that today, unfortunately, many of the criminal groups have figured out how to create fentanyl on their own here domestically without having to import it. And so that's created a whole bunch of challenges for us. But I think, part of what we have to do is recognize how do we deal with a crisis like this? Well, number one, we have to look at the evidence of what we're doing currently and honestly say to ourselves, is this working? Are we getting good results? Well, the answer is clearly no. Our streets are in chaos. Okay, we've got, especially under David Eby, he was Attorney General for 5.5 years. He oversaw what we call a catch and release program, where repeat violent offenders are being released right back into the community, often the same day. And, we've seen this over and over. Just yesterday, when I was in the legislature, I raised the example of in Richmond, where 2 women were violently assaulted, knocked unconscious by a random stranger. This is a horrific situation we have, and yet these individuals will be often back on the streets right away. So, and we've held him personally responsible for this. David Eby, for 5.5 years, did nothing. And when I became leader of this party, I started raising this in the legislature a year ago, and he dismissed it. And they tried to say, oh, it's anecdotal, they're making this up, and it's not that bad. And only when the mayors started writing him and others in the community said, what is going on? And stories are in the news every night. Only then did he finally acknowledge, okay, there appears to be a problem. And then he hired 2 consultants to spend 5 months, almost half a year, to study the problem and tell him how to do his job. And we've been telling him from day one, he can give direction to Crown Counsel to say to them, when you have a repeat offender in front of you, the interest of public safety must be the priority over the interest of that individual to be let go back into the community. And he's refused to do that to this day.
Now, so you mentioned about the repeat offender, and it's under David Eby when he was the Attorney General. He's the one responsible.
Yes.
And he is the one responsible for the revolving door for repeat offender. But we're talking about the drug market, supply and demand.
Yes.
We're talking about the victims. They are the victims got addicted to this bad thing, drugs. And then we got the supply. There's a lot of supply to supply those all addicts. And the addict has to pay for their supply.
Yes.
And they pay with money. And then the money where they got, according to the Coonan Commission, it sounds like the drug trade is related to the money laundering and the real estate market, and everything got together. And you have been in the government for a long time, so you know this has been going on according to the Coonan Commission. So how are we going to reduce the supply?
Well, this is not a new problem. I mean, this is a challenge around North America. The supply will always find its way to the demand. Okay, so criminals, if there's sufficient demand and an appetite for drugs, they will always find a way to somehow get those drugs to the people that need them. So that's why I think education, especially of children, is so very important, because we have to intervene early, especially for recent immigrants. I am most concerned about recent immigrants that come into British Columbia because they're very vulnerable. They don't speak the language. Sometimes their parents are very, very busy trying to adapt to this new world. They're into a school with a bunch of strange people. They're very vulnerable. And we have to make sure that we're providing opportunities for these young kids to be involved in positive things like sports programs or science programs or after-school programs, etc. That's something that I think we have to do urgently, because we want to make sure that we stop the future children from developing into a lifestyle of drug use and addiction. Then we have to deal with the people that are currently addicted, and that goes to my plan about making sure we set up addiction treatment programs. Not just those places I talked about for those that have severe mental health and addiction, but we also, as part of my plan, said we were going to send up special treatment facilities where you could stay for up to 1 year and you get off of your drug addiction, and we teach you life skills so that you can, become a productive member of society again. When you finish your 1 year term, you can go back into society. That's important. And then we have to work with the police. The police need help too. We can't undermine the police like the current NDP government does and criticize them all the time and provide them no support. I am very, very supportive of our police officers. They do an incredible job every day, trying hard to keep our streets safe. But they also need the support to go after the drug dealers and the organized criminal gangs that are taking advantage of the fact that we have very vulnerable people addicted to drugs.
Now, you talk about treatment. Do you support involuntary treatment detox of the addicts?
Yes, and I have said that before, and that was part of our plan, that in some cases, in hopefully limited cases, but in some cases we will have to take people involuntarily off of the street and put them into treatment. And that's an obligation we have as society, because some of these people have lost control of their ability to make decisions in their own best interest. And yet right now, under the current government, we leave them on the streets, to roam the streets and be exploited and abused. And that's not acceptable to me, because all of these people are somebody's, brother or sister or parent or child. And we, especially with young people, we have to help them if they can't help themselves. Because if we don't, we're sentencing them to a lifetime of probably an early death and a very horrific lifetime. So that, in some cases, yes, we've been very clear. We support involuntary detention of some of these people.
So I'm happy to hear that you make it clear. So you support the involuntary treatment of some addicts because they cannot control their life. They lost their mind, as according to a lot of Chinese saying. If somebody cannot make the right decision from themselves, we have to help them to make the right choice.
We do.
Now, we have been talking about the Liberal, the BC Liberal. Are you still a BC Liberal? Have you changed the name of the party?
Yes. Well, we're in the process of changing the name. So we've gotten the approval from our membership. It was overwhelmingly supportive. And the reason that we're changing our name to BC United is because I want to make sure that we have a name that represents think of a very large tent. A very large tent that everybody feels welcome to belong under this tent. I want more members of the Chinese community and the South Asian community and the Vietnamese community and the Filipino community and the Black community. I want to make sure that white people and people with high school educations and blue collar workers and white collar workers and entrepreneurs all feel united in this big tent of ours called BC United. That's very, very important to me because I think we all share a lot of values that are very similar. We are concerned about the drug crisis. We're concerned about making sure we have safe streets. We want to have a government that encourages people to start businesses and be entrepreneurs, that doesn't make it harder but celebrates success. Success is a good thing. We shouldn't be criticizing people for being successful. We should be encouraging it. And I think that if we do that, then we will get a lot of people together under this big tent called BC United, and we will win the next election for sure.
Now, the old name, after you change the name, will someone else take over the name BC Liberal and form another party?
No, and that was an important part of this process. We wanted to make sure that can't happen. So there will be nobody that will be able to take the BC Liberal name. We're going to make sure that we've reserved that so that they can't. And the new name will make sure we get it out there so people know about it. So we'll have a special announcement. There'll be lots of information. I know that there will be lots of media attention because they'll be interested in seeing, what we look like going forward and what our branding and logo will look like. So it'll be very exciting.
Now, it sounds like you want to make this BC United Party a big tent.
Yes.
So more people can join you. But we still have a party called BC Conservative.
Yes.
And we heard that a former member of the BC Liberal will be sitting as a BC Conservative and will probably need the group for the next election to have a BC Liberal. How are you going to get that together?
Sure. So first of all, it's really important to understand the BC Conservative Party has been around for a long time. It has no connection to the federal Conservative Party. They're totally different. And really all that's happened is John Rustad, who was a former BC Liberal MLA, who we expelled from our party because he was, coming forward with beliefs that were entirely inconsistent with everything our party stands for, even though he'd supported those in the past. And so we said, you can't be part of our party. So he sat as an independent. All he's done now is he's just taken a membership and joined the BC Conservatives. And I'm fine with that. He's got the right to do that. I have no problem. But I'm not, frankly, concerned about the BC Conservatives. They've always been there. I was part of running against the BC Conservatives when they had a 6-term member of parliament named John Cummins that was the head of the BC Conservatives, much more high profile and very well known. And we, defeated them very handily when he was there. So, I'm not concerned about John. Is just he's now a member of the party. That's all. And the leader of the party is actually a fellow named Trevor Bolins up in Fort St. John. I don't know if Trevor will stay on as leader or John becomes leader. I don't really care, frankly. I think that, that in this day and age, I think that a party that brings people together, that's not divisive, that's not, trying to split people apart, but actually brings people together under really good policies and good ideas, that's going to be the successful party.
So do you expect to have an election this year, and by that time, will we still have this BC Liberal as we still calling you the BC Liberal leader, or you will be the leader of the BC United?
Well, that's an excellent question, and that's why I've always said we have to be very strategic about when we become the BC United, because David Eby can call the election whenever he wants. Now, he has been very clear to the media. They just asked him again, I think it was about a week ago, will you be calling an early election? And he was so definitive. He said, look, I don't know how many times I have to say this. There is not going to be an early election. The election will be in October 2024. So that's what he says. But, as a former U.S. president said, trust but verify. So I am not going to fully trust David Eby because the NDP said this in the past and they called an election during COVID. So we will make sure we're ready for an early election, because I'm not going to be taken by surprise. But I don't believe he will call an election this spring, because to do so, I think, would so undermine his integrity and credibility and his honesty that even he, I don't think, would ever go there. Because how could you ever trust somebody that's been so definitive? Now, could he call one in the fall? Yes, I think that's more likely, or maybe even the spring of next year. But I think it'll be sometimes in the fall or the spring.
Okay, so you will still be under this BC Liberal by that time?
I suspect we'll be under BC United, but more on that to come.
Okay, so thank you very much for coming to the program. The leader of the BC official opposition, the BC Liberal, Calvin Falcon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ronald. Really appreciate it.
好多謝咧，係 BC 自由黨黨領 Calvin Falcon 馮怡果咧，同大家講咗咁多有關於咧係 BC 醫療，特別咧係 BC 省點樣去處理精神健康同癖癮問題㗎。嗱，佢好清楚咧，就講俾大家聽，佢對於現時嘅毒品非刑事化嘅睇法，同埋對於一啲已經係吸毒好耐呢啲嘅所謂癮君子，佢唔能夠為自己做一個正確嘅決定嘅時候，政府或者醫療人員咧係有咁嘅責任，要將佢帶去一個強迫性嘅戒毒。希望可以改變到佢嘅生命，唔使繼續沉淪喺呢個毒海嘅。嗱，如果大家仍然係喺呢方面咧有任何問題嘅時候咧，你可以咧去揾你嘅省議員 MLA 咧問清楚究竟佢喺呢個問題上面嘅立場。我亦都講得好清楚咧，華人社區對於毒品嘅睇法，由於個歷史嘅原因，我哋對於毒品嘅毒害係非常之了解嘅，唔希望咧喺加拿大，特別喺我哋 BC 省咧，繼續咧係走向呢一條將毒品變為一個合法用途，令到更多人咧係受毒品所控制嘅。咁今日咧就好多謝咧係阿馮怡干 BC 自由黨黨領同大家咧係講咗咁多關於呢個問題佢哋嘅睇法嘅。